Good morning. Call the meeting of the Long Island Railroad Committee to order on July 24th. Are there public comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have two public speakers this morning, Murray Bowden, followed by Jason Anthony Pinheiro. I'd like to respectfully ask our speakers to be mindful of the 2-minute limit for comments and to limit their comments to matters on the agenda.
Why? When you guys don't follow the rules, I'm supposed to follow the rules? What is it, two sets of circumstances going on here? I was in East Hampton this week. Oh, wait a minute. Situational awareness was brought up in the first part of the meeting. Don't you all know situational? You need a microphone in front of you. If you don't talk into the microphone, I can't hear it here. They can't hear it there. You want us to follow the rules? You need a lesson, this board. All of you, the microphone needs to be in front of you. You need to speak into it. We couldn't hear you before. I don't know if you had a chance to read George Will's Weapon Technology Has Been Stalled for Decades. Neil, PTC is 10 years old. Why are you trying to come up to it? I heard you. It's not something that we have to finish on time. It's something we have to get rid of. It's absolutely useless. My car drives by itself. It's not connected to a computer. It doesn't have all kinds of programs. It's something that's outmoded and should have been stopped. We're using radar at airports that's 50 years old. Other places have satellites up there and they're flying direct. You're a pilot. You flew a helicopter.
I flew Hueys. Those were, I never flew one younger than me, so.
So we're using technology that's old. In Long Island, was in East Hampton, you got traffic lights and flashing red lights. Why do we have two sets? Mitch, it's your area out there. Driving in East Hampton, why do you have flashing red lights and traffic lights on the same intersection? If you can't answer that one, why are you all here? You can't give up old-fashioned technology. All of this, you've got a cultural issue here. I said to the chief he should get out of his uniform. Cultural issue. We've always had a uniform, but Mike Cohn didn't have a uniform on. Joe Fox wears a uniform. That's a cultural issue. Until you start dealing with the culture and changing it from over there, from at the top. Why do you expect these people? Because you got a lot of good people working here. They're afraid to open their mouths because I talk to them downstairs. Why do you think I come here for an hour early? To talk to people and find out what's going on. They're afraid to speak out because you don't listen.
Mr. Pinheiro.
Very nice. Good morning. I see that Murray Bowden slashed at you guys. It is not appropriate to be disrespectful to authorities. But, Pat, remember that I told you that there was 2 air train machines in Penn Station? And you told me that there's no money to buy new ones? Here's an idea. Why don't you remove one of those machines to Atlanta Terminal, and one of them that is in Atlanta Terminal, you could transfer it to Penn Station. There's no money involved. There's no spending on new equipment. And dealing with the sum of hell could alleviate people that have to spend extra money when they traveling between Penn Station and the airport. And speaking of which, These several past weekends, there was no E-train service east of Forest Hills. That therefore, the Long Island Railroad was supposed to cross honor between Penn Station and Jamaica. But are your conductors aware of that? Of course not. Because these past 2 weekends have been commuting between Penn Station and Jamaica, and none of them were aware of these service changes that are occurring onto the first weekend of August. So Pat, if you want my trust back, you need a lot of work to do. And that will be my discussion for this month.
Thank you very much to our public speakers. I have the minutes of the June 19th meeting. Are there any suggested changes or anything? If not, motion to approve. Second, all in favor? Pat, is there any change to the work plan?
No change to the work plan.
Okay. Why don't we then start with your report?
Okay, great. We're going to have a little slideshow here. This is a chart that I've provided at your seat in the past. This is the chart of Penn Station. This is obviously the focus of our attention this summer. And just to remind you, the peach-colored area at the top is the area that's exclusively used by the Long Island Railroad. That is tracks 17 through 21. The green in the middle are the shared tracks. They are shared by all three agencies. They are tracks 13 through 16. And the lower portion in the white is the area that is shared by Amtrak and New Jersey Transit. Now, if you look at the far left end of the slide, you will see the orange area extends right to the edge of the paper there, or I'm looking at paper, you're looking at a slide, right to the edge of the display there, and that is the 4 tracks that are our lead to West Side Yard. So that's where those tracks go. You will see 2 tracks in the middle that come out of the center of the station, and they are the 2 tracks going to the 2 Hudson River tunnel tubes. And then down at the lower portion, you may not be able to see it because it's a dotted line, but that is the tunnel that takes you up the Hudson line there. So that's where Penn Station, the layout is. And now let me show you a little bit what's going on this summer. You'll see a couple areas clouded out there. The cloud on the left-hand side is the area where Amtrak is doing a tremendous amount of work renewing switches, track in that area. And the long cloud in the through the platform area, that is track 10. And in track 10, they are completely renewing the track in through that area. Just to zoom in a little bit on the clouded area on the west end there, you can see the number of double slip switches, turnouts, double crossovers, etc. that exist in that area, all in extremely close proximity to each other. So it is a tremendously complicated area within to work and do the track renewal. The track 10 area consists of several different types of construction through the platform area. Some of it is ties embedded in concrete, and other areas is traditional ties and ballast. Just some pictures of some of the construction progress and the work that's been going on. When Amtrak goes in any area that is ballasted area, the first thing they need to do is get the ballast out of their way. This is a large vacuum. It is used to vacuum the ballast out between the ties and along the track. You can see a picture here of how complicated and complex the rails are in here. It is just one switch upon another switch upon another switch. So once the ballast is vacuumed out, there are a tremendous number of bolts and spikes to pull in order to be able to remove the old rails and to be able to put in the new rails. Here's a couple pictures of both the old rails being removed and the new rails being put in place. As you can see, Amtrak has a very large crane that they use to work. Obviously, there's a very limited height within Penn Station, so it is a specially constructed crane that works off of a railroad car. You are not really able to boom up, as it's known in the business, to raise, so it has to have a tremendous amount of weight, strength to be able to pick up these panels and put them into position in the station. Here you can see some of the new panels put in place. The ballast is gone, the new ties or the old track completely is gone, and you can see the puzzle pieces that you need to put together to make all this work inside of Penn Station. Everything is color-coded to match up joints and that type of stuff. It's a way to keep in place, but here you can see everything in place, but no ballast is yet in place with the new track in construction. And then finally you see some of the new work as it approaches completion with the new ballast put in place and the track is surfaced and ready to go. Switching to track 10. I mentioned that some of this construction is ties embedded in concrete. This is a backhoe ram, hydraulic ram that's used to break up the concrete to remove the ties out of the old bed. After the ties are removed, we've got to do some leveling, we've got to put some rebar in. We've got to do the alignment for both the rail and the third rail that needs to be installed through this area. The ties, once they're in, need to be put to the appropriate level. The formwork is put in place, and then concrete is poured around the new ties to progress that renewal. But that's not all of track 10. Some of track 10 is also ties and ballast, so this is similar to the stuff that you saw in the switch area. Here you can see the new rail, the new ties, but you don't see any ballast yet in there, so it's a similar type approach to what you saw previously. Let me switch gears a little bit, or I'll talk just in summary on the construction. Amtrak, as you know, has been working around the clock since Friday night, July the 7th. The work has been monitored extremely closely, both by Amtrak, by us, and by New Jersey Transit. The progress to date is that they are exactly on schedule. So things are progressing the way they were expected, and we will continue to monitor to ensure that we do stay on track to get the work done. But let me talk a little bit about the plan that was put in place. I know we talked about this previously, but I want to talk about it from a little bit different perspective, and that is, this was an all-hands-on-deck exercise. This was done with the help of taking a very large number of managers out of their offices into the field. We also were able to get support and help both from Metro North and headquarters here. Their staff were also out at our sites. You can see a lot of the stations here where we station personnel in the morning, particularly the first week, but we did run it into the second week as well a little bit. Some of the ambassadors are still in place to this time, but now we've focused more on the terminal areas, Jamaica, Penn Station, Atlantic Terminal, and Hunters Point. We also opened up our situation room. The Situation Room was originally open 16 hours a day. We were starting at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to 9 o'clock in the evening. We are now back to just keeping the Situation Room during the AM and the PM rush periods. But this is where typically we control, whether it be a hurricane, a snowstorm, or any other type of situation. All the departments get around the table to monitor progress throughout their various areas. This one's a little bit different because we actually have people in that room from New York Transit Bus. We have people from the New York State DOT in there. We have our communications and security folks in there in addition to our operational folks. So it is an extremely busy area. It is one that is very much needed. You really need to know everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing there and what everybody else is working on. Just a picture of some of our ambassadors that are out there throughout the system trying to assist customers as they adjust to the new service. This is a picture of Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, Barclays Center, where what you see there are transit employees who are out there for the cross-honoring function that was put in place at Atlantic Terminal for the people departing the Long Island Railroad and getting on the subway system there. A shot of some of our people out, as I said, at the outlying stations to give customers information about what we're doing, what the transit changes are. A photo of some of our folks where the bus services were set up. Now the bus services have been changed. We have always approached this as one where we need to adjust depending on what we saw the commuting patterns to be of people, and we have reduced the level of bus service out on the island. This is the service in Manhattan where we had people. And then this is the service at some of the facilities that we had out on the island. Originally we had 8, then we reduced it to 5 locations that are up and running out on the island. We also went into the ferry business, and my slide projectionist back there is now known as Captain Betty. She is the Chief Ferry Officer for... New title for CFO here, Chief Ferry Officer at the Long Island Railroad. But we have engaged 4 different ferry companies to provide the service for us, both out of Long Island City and out of Glen Cove. The Glen Cove operation has been more successful of the 2. It appears the Hunters Point Avenue people are primarily using the 7 line for the rest of their commute going forward. Again, just another shot. This is the one down in Long Island City, obviously, with the city right across the way. Also wanted to mention one of the things that happened in time for this event was the opening of the West End Concourse. Mitch, you had asked for some photos of the West End Concourse, and this is one of the photos. As you can sort of tell here, and I got a couple more photos I'll show you, it is a much roomier area than people are used to in the rest of Penn Station, so it is a much improved condition that's there. You can see the people have quickly discovered it and are using it, which is certainly a good thing. We did have our ambassadors there during the service schedule going forward. And then just another shot of the folks in the West End Concourse. So it is being used and it is being successful. So let me just talk a little bit about numbers. You know, what I told you the last time we got together was that the real impact of this work was in the peak of the peak, that we really needed to make adjustments between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning is the AM peak of the peak, because that's where we had to cut the most service or divert the most service. and that is the area where we needed people to move more to the shoulders of the peak. We also needed the people to adjust their commuting patterns. So we have a ridership count that we did in June, and you'll see that there on the left-hand side where it says Spring 2017 baseline. And if you looked at there, you will see at Penn Station, we counted 86,000 people in the AM rush, which represented 11% or 86% of the total AM ridership. But what you'll see when you look at weeks 1 and week 2, we reduced that. About 10,000 people left Penn Station that normally would go there during the peak. And when you look at Atlantic Terminal, you'll find that their ridership increased on the order of 50%, going from 10,000 to 15,000, 16,000 people. Hunters Point Avenue went from 3,000 people to 5,000, 6,000 people. So we are seeing the shift that we needed, both in commuting patterns. People are going to different locations. And if you were also to look at the numbers that we captured by the hour, you will see that people did transition from the peak of the peak more to the shoulders of the peak in terms of their travel times. So the plan that was put in effect, including the fare discount to utilize Atlantic Terminal and Hunters Point, has been successful. People did change their commuting patterns. To some extent it was forced because there's less service available during that time. But we are accommodating. The first week we actually had the same number of people. The second week it's down just slightly. I think there are normal variations that we see in commuting with summer and vacations and that type of stuff. But we are continuing to move the people. They are adjusting. We are continually trying to tweak it, and we did make some tweaks today to the service schedule, trying to. Some trains get overcrowded or undercrowded and that type of stuff, and we're changing some stopping patterns. We're moving train schedules a minute or two here or there, trying to even out the loading both on the trains and at the station. So it is a continual effort that we do to go forward. So that's a brief update on our ridership through the summer. I would characterize it as one that has very much gone according to plan, and obviously we did a lot of planning. But I also want to thank all the people that have worked so hard to make this a success. There was a tremendous amount of work that went into this, tremendous amount of coordination. The Long Island Railroad staff has been at this much longer than the 2 weeks that the revised service plan has been in effect. We've been at this for several months, trying to make sure everything was organized and ready to go. So I very much want to thank the Long Island Railroad team, but I also want to thank the headquarters team, the MTA Police, the Metro North team. This has been one where everybody has come to our assist and helped us to make this a successful thing. So it is very much appreciated. I know our riders appreciate it, and it's been a good news story to this point in time. Just a couple other things. There was a discussion at the Metro North Committee on ridership, and I've previously had given you some numbers on our ridership. I will say that our ridership in the last 4 months, 3 of the 4 months have actually been below last year's level, and that's 3 of the last 4 months. The first 3 months of the year, our ridership was robust, and we are still up year to date, slightly under 1% in terms of our total ridership. But our ridership it does seem to be flattening out now. Obviously, the last 4 months we've had a lot of disruptions at Penn, and I'm certain that had a certain amount of impact on us. and going into July as well. The other thing I wanted to mention is, Mitch, and I know you've worked on this, but there is a real estate item that is in the Finance Committee meeting today, and that is for the Riverhead Station, where we have worked with the town to take a station that has largely been vacant and has unfortunately drawn some undesirable residents to the area, and we are very pleased to have a deal, and it won't be in our committee, it'll be in the Finance Committee, but we are pleased to have a deal to get the town of Riverhead, the ambulance group in there, and we'll establish a presence, and it'll be a good news for that station. And that's mine, but Lori, I'm sure, has a few safety tidbits.
Let me see first, let me do your report first, Lori, before we get to you. Questions or comments on Ira?
Yes, first I want to commend you and the staff of the Long Island Railroad. Everybody all the way down has done a fantastic job. And you said you said several months. I don't think you even had that much time to do the planning for this, and I must commend.
It seems like
for doing a very.
It may have been shorter, but it certainly seems like it's.
But it was well done in a short amount of time. And I just think everyone did an excellent job. The experience hasn't been anywhere near as bad as many people had feared. One choke point, basically a pedestrian choke point, is Hunters Point Avenue. Ridership there increased dramatically. That platform isn't made to handle that kind of load. I was wondering, even when you proposed it, I didn't ask this, but why isn't Long Island City being used more? It's also closer to that ferry.
We have a few trains that run there every morning, and very few people traditionally have ever gone to Long Island City. The transfer, despite the dilapidated nature of the Hunters Point Avenue station, is very convenient, and people are creatures of habit, and they've done that, and they continue to do that. I'm not surprised by it. And the 7 service is very convenient if you're going into the east side there. So,
I mean, the Long Island City Station is close to the Vernon Jackson Station, albeit that station has become very crowded because of the residential development in the area, and that might be, maybe that's why you don't do that. I don't know. I mean, as far as the ferry goes, I could see why people wouldn't use it unless there's and they have when there's a problem on the 7, but I just was asking about that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Randy?
Yeah, I did go out there last week, and I saw the ridership at Hunters Point, and the supervisors were pleading with the people. Here's a bus ride to a nice ferry. It's only 4 minutes to Manhattan, but very few people were really interested. And otherwise, they did a great job on the whole thing. But the work Amtrak is doing, is this only at 9 hours? If it is, I understand it. I get it.
no. Amtrak is going 24 hours a day, 7
I
days a
didn't
week.
see anybody there when I was there on Friday.
No, they're there.
Okay.
Believe me, they're there.
Okay.
Chuck?
I assume you're keeping track of the costs, both in terms of lost ridership and actual out-of-pocket costs, are you not?
Absolutely.
Are we expending any money in respect of the actual work being done at Penn Station?
Only as a monitoring perspective.
The actual work is being taken care of by Amtrak and paid for by Amtrak?
Penn Station is strictly their facility, and they do all the work.
Thank you.
Anyone else on that portion of the report? I just wanted to thank Pat and his team for their tremendous activity and planning in this regard. They've done a great job. I also want to thank all of our labor unions who have been very helpful in this regard. And I also want to thank our customers for their patience. They're not always known to have patience and forbearance. I'm sure they're no different than our friends at Metro North. They expect a certain quality of a ride for the amount of money that they're paying in both instances, and for some period of time we have not been able to provide that for a variety of circumstances many of them outside of our control. But at least the first 2 weeks, I think, have been better than anyone could expect. That's no guarantee that the next 6 weeks will be that way. We can only hope and pray that will happen, but so far so good, and I wanted to take the opportunity here, since we will not be back in August, to thank our customers for their patience, and knowing that we are doing everything we can, both at the railroad and here at MTA, to make their summer as convenient as possible. And I think so far that has proven to be successful, and we're hopeful that the rest of the summer will prove the same way.
Yeah, Mitch, and you're exactly right. Our customers have done a tremendous job of adapting to the change schedule, and it's not an easy thing, because I use the phrase creatures of habit, and we all certainly are, and certainly they are as well. But they have adapted, they have listened to the message, and they have gotten out there and changed their commuting patterns, as evidenced by the numbers. And you mentioned the team. When I mentioned all the employees that were involved, obviously we have had great cooperation, Vinny, from your group, from all the labor groups, because we're doing things that are very much different, very much unique to our normal course of business, and the cooperation of everybody has just been tremendous, and that has helped to make this work to the extent it has so far. But again, thanks to both.
Scott?
Yeah, Mitch, I just wanted to follow up and just echo, first of all, the compliments to the team for getting us through the first 2 weeks in such a successful, painless way based on what everyone expected. One point that you raised, Mitchell, I think that is important here is the customers. And one of the reasons I think that they have been so flexible is our communication outreach. It's been, great communication, so they know what's to come, and they're adjusting because they have that benefit. So I would just encourage that, to the extent either A, Amtrak is falling behind schedule, or B, we're making adjustments to our programs like you did this morning, that we continue that outreach to the customer so that they can adjust, because the worst thing for them is to get to a place thinking there's going to be a ferry or a train, and it's not there at that point. And I'd also just say, more generally for the MTA, I think this is a good model in terms of understanding that if you can communicate issues to customers, then the natural challenges that we might face in the system would be, they'd be more acceptable to dealing with and adjusting to the extent that we are, ahead of the game.
I would agree. Anyone else on that aspect of it? Okay, safety report?
Good morning. We're reporting on our safety performance through the end of May, and that can be found in your book on page 63. Our FRA reportable customer injuries continue to be lower than in the previous 2 periods, and right now our FRA reportable employee lost time injuries are on par with last year, the same period. In addition, our MTA Police, Long Island Railroad Corporate Safety Department Community Outreach and Education Partnership has reached over 44,000 participants this year. We actually will be talking more on Wednesday at the Safety Committee meeting about some of our ongoing and our new initiatives, so I'll provide more detail then, but I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
Any questions on safety? I do find it interesting, I'm not quite sure my definition of the word interesting, that our number of grade crossing incidents is significantly higher than Metro North's. Now, I know we have more places where that happens, but it is a ongoing issue and ongoing concern in the larger context. Regardless of the numbers, we do seem to have more incidents, and that obviously has been a focal point of the safety committee, but we're going to just have to try to figure out what we might be able to do better to get those numbers down, because every time it happens, as we all know, it doesn't just affect the person who gets affected by it. it affects all the people on the train that it happens to and all the trains after them. It's a concern. Go ahead.
With the 3 E's, engineering, education, and enforcement, I think what's really been our focus is working very closely with MTA Police and sharing information so that we can, as you notice, we report on broken gate incidents. And a lot of those broken gate incidents help us to really focus on the crossings that tend to be more problematic. We all know that generally the incidents occur because somebody is violating the crossing protection. So we're working very closely with the road authorities and with MTA Headquarters Safety and New York State DOT to experiment with some new treatments to see how we might improve the awareness of the drivers around the crossings. The education and the enforcement efforts in our partnership with MTA Police are outstanding when we really target our interventions on those crossings that tend to create the most issues for us. Obviously, the number of crossings as well as the density and the concentration of population around the crossings also poses some unique challenges that I think other commuter and even freight properties don't have across the country. So it's a collaborative effort, and it's consistent, and it's really trying to continue to focus our efforts. But it's a challenge, absolutely.
Well, at least soon we'll have 7 less. It may cost us some money, but we will have 7 less. So we'll be able to reduce the number in that context to make it at least much safer and much more efficient in the Nassau County area in that regard. Neil, did you want to add something to that?
I did brief comment. Laura, you bring up our safety committee meeting on Wednesday. I would appreciate, not that 24 hours turnaround time is a lot, but when you have the NTSB report tomorrow that comes out for Valhalla, I'd like an interpretation from you and from David and the group about what that means for our grade crossing behaviors in general. I was pointing at David Mayer. Because I suspect you'll have some commentary about grade crossings, and I feel like given the 300 and something you have in Long Island, and we have the 100 and something in Metro North, it would be important to just hear what new thoughts we have for how to deal with this.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Capital Construction?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman. Your comments about the reduction in grade crossings are, of course, referring to the third track project. Yes. And I just a note of appreciation to add to some of those that have been voiced. To the Long Island Railroad team, Pat, Elisa, everybody else, our 2 organizations are establishing the management structure for that third track project, which is in the middle of procurement and is slated to hit the ground running pretty soon. So it's been a great ramp up, and I wanted to acknowledge that. There's been some progress on East Side access, and I would like my colleague, Mr. Goodrich, to talk a little about it.
Thank you, General. This morning, I wanted to talk about one of our contracts in Herald that, since our last meeting, has achieved substantial completion. And wanted to show you, first of all, we'll just start with the extent of East Side access. I hope everyone is aware of it, but it is geographically, we do have a large footprint. We extend as far south of Grand Central as 37th Street and Park Avenue. Our tunnels go all the way up to 63rd Street and cross underneath Roosevelt Island, all the way into Queens, out to the Herald Interlocking. The area shown in red, which I'm going to is where the contract is. I'm going to talk about this morning. This contract was completed ahead of schedule on June 30th, 2017. The contract date was July 5th, and the overall contract value was $69 million, and the duration was 19 months. Contractor was Tudor Perini Corporation. What's shown here is there's 4 tunnels in Herald Interlocking that Eastside Access is constructing. The tunnels were completed in 2012 with our soft ground tunnel boring machines. The yard lead tunnel, which is the one on the lowest part of the slide, in that loops around, will connect to the future midday storage yard for train storage. Its current use is for construction deliveries into the Manhattan caverns. There are 3 tunnels that will provide service to Grand Central Terminal. Tunnel A on the top is for westbound trains. Tunnel D is for eastbound, and Tunnel B/C is for either direction depending upon the peak travel. So each of the 3 tunnels, as I mentioned, were previously completed to a point below the interlocking by TBM mining and precast concrete construction. The 3 approach tunnels and structures connect in this area to the railroad main lines. Track D approach is the one being discussed today, as that is the one we've recently completed. The Track A approach, Track D is shown in green on the slide. Track A, shown in orange, is under construction and is expected to be complete in 2018. Track BC approach in the center is still in design, and we expect to award that contract before the end of the year 2018. So let's talk a little bit about the D approach. It starts just west of the 39th Street Bridge and connects to the main line west of 43rd Street. This contract constructed about 750 feet of the approach structure. So this is a picture from last year, kind of an interesting picture. This is the cut and cover excavation that was in progress at that time, and the massive iron thing that you see exposed, steel, is the TBM cutter head from the soft ground tunneling that was left in place as they completed that. So the cutter head was removed as part of this contract during the excavation operation. Next slide here is the view of the completed box structure of the D approach. It's a single track. The round bored tunnel would be behind us in this picture with daylight at the far end. Next slide. In addition to the tunnel approach structure, the scope of their work included the installation of a new bridge over 48th Street for main line number 2. The existing bridge consisted of 4 steel laced plate girders, which were deteriorated and beyond their useful service life. The bridge was over 70 years old, and it spans about 100 feet. So that was removed, and we replaced it with a new mainline 2 bridge shown here. This is viewed from the 48th Street sidewalk below. I do want to mention this past weekend with the Long Island Railroad, we did place into service a new section of mainline 2 track crossing with track that crosses over this bridge. That went into revenue service this morning. A number of infrastructure improvements were included in this contract as well. Shown here is the installation of a new signal bridge. These are typically installed during night shift when the disruption to train service can be minimized. There's other miscellaneous structures shown that were included in the contract. What's shown here is a brick masonry headhouse structure. It's a secure access stair for Long Island Railroad yard crew personnel so they can access Tunnel D. Also included is installation of catenary support trusses, such as what you see here for relocated Amtrak lines. And other catenary structures, typically the contractor will install the catenary pole foundation, catenary pole and the cross arms, and then the Amtrak will come in and they'll install the lines and the components as part of the catenary system. This is a mainline 4 track installed. In total, as part of this contract, there was 2,000 lineal feet of new track installed as part of CH-57. So we're pleased to report that this is now complete. In other areas, Harold, I do want to mention that we successfully drew down the full amount of the federal portion of the FRA high-speed rail grant. totaling about $295 million on June 17th. We continue to work towards the completion of the remaining contracts that are part of the FRA grant. In terms of one other item, on July 18th, MTA Real Estate, on behalf of both Long Island Railroad and Capital Construction, issued a request for proposal to telecommunication companies for the rights to design, install, operate, and maintain a cellular and Wi-Fi system for passengers and Long Island Railroad operational use throughout the ESA territory. The RFP seeks proposers to fund the wireless system build-out and offers a dark fiber business opportunity. Both are potentially new revenue-generating opportunities for the MTA. The RFP was developed over a year of intense efforts in partnership with Long Island Railroad, MTA headquarters, real estate, and MTA PD. Finally, I do want to talk a little bit about Amtrak and its work at Penn Station. We understand and are supporting the what's going on there. However, it doesn't go on without an impact to the construction activity for East Side Access and Herald. I use as an example track foremen. Track foremen typically are provided by Amtrak whenever we're working in their territory, and for safety reasons, there's at least one track foreman assigned to each one of our construction activities as far as what they call access and protection. The ESA need has been for 13 track foremen. That's typically during this period what we've needed. Amtrak had previously committed to providing 9, so that we had a reduction of 4 there. However, during this work that they're doing in July and August, and we've been told at least until September 1st or early September when this work is scheduled to complete, we're only going to receive 4 track foremen, which means we can only schedule 4 activities in the Amtrak area in Herald. It does have an impact on it. We are tracking the costs and the delay costs that are going to be associated with that. And that concludes my report.
Questions? Chuck?
What is there to prevent you, if anything, from using or retaining your own foreman to substitute for the Amtrak foreman during the course of this in order to keep going?
It is something that we're looking at for the future work. We obviously have a few more years of work in the interlocking. We do need to get. We are in discussions with Amtrak about it. We would need to get clearance from the unions that have jurisdiction, which that relationship is with Amtrak. We are actively looking at that because I strongly believe that's one of the solutions going forward.
Yeah, but while you're looking at it, the work is slowing down. My great-grandchildren won't be around at this rate.
Well, we are having discussions, but we have to obtain the labor clearance first before we would be able to.
Have you talked to the union leadership? I've always found them extremely cooperative.
There's in fairness, Mr. Merdler, there's a broader issue that we are trying to address, and it's become more acute with this summer's developments. But there is an issue of some long-standing with respect to the adequacy of force account labor, force account supervision in a variety of trades. It has been complicated by the union issues, but the union issues are not the only issues that govern this. It has to do with the prioritization of different projects at different times. Okay. Apologies to the members of the audience if I wasn't.
I heard you.
They couldn't hear me, but there has been an increasing pattern where the East Side Access project, which had a variety of very important outage work that need to be done within weekend outages. Those outages had to be removed partly because of Amtrak's work, some other conditions as well. So there is a broader issue. And so to your question, I'd say it's not just a matter of talking to the unions. We need a broader understanding with Amtrak, with the other players who need to sit at the table, and the different projects to address the allocation of outages, to address the need for different types of supervisory labor and actual force account workers to perform work on behalf of Amtrak. And we are pursuing that at the highest level of the organization right now. There's a master schedule being prepared, which is the basis of a broader discussion that is underway with all these organizations. So I very much appreciate the point that you're making, but I just want to reassure you that there's a full-scale effort underway to address it with my colleagues.
Mr. Lieber, I appreciate that, and few people in this part of the world have your experience and savvy in this area. My only point is this. East Side Access has been delayed so many years that so many people believe it'll never happen, notwithstanding the vast expenditures that have gone into it. And what I would urge you to do, among the many other things that you have responsibility for doing, is to see if we can find some way on a continuing basis to provide substitute personnel where Amtrak fails to provide it. That has been the problem that Michael Horodnichanu has pointed to for at least the entire 7 years I've been on this board as being a recurring problem. And it seems to me that we ought to see if you can do it. If there's anyone who can do that, it is you.
Appreciate your confidence. Thank you.
Many of us have raised the same issue in internal discussions, and we're hopeful because one of the things that occurs here is all this work not only benefits us, it benefits Amtrak. And so the quicker we get it done, the quicker they get benefits as well as we get benefits from the work done at Harold. So hopefully, both sides will understand the benefit of this type of activity being done quickly. Neil?
Mr. Lieber, maybe given the newness of your job, this is a good opportunity to ask this question. I commute out of Long Island in July and August, so I take some personal interest in this project, although I suspect my term is over when this will be done in 2022. Is that the right year?
Yes.
So my term is over by then, so maybe I won't need to come to this meeting, but I will probably still need to come to Manhattan. However, it would be interesting to know whether through historic data you've done or a new survey, what is the expected ridership into East Side Access from Long Island? I ask this because over the last several years and since the mid-90s when this was proposed, I wouldn't say necessarily the center of gravity, but a significant portion of sort of office population work that was in Midtown has been moving either to Hudson Yards, where I just moved to my office, or to down this region where you just moved. And many of my clients have moved into this area. So I'm just interested to know what the expected load of population is.
I'll let Bill take a shot at that, but I think that to answer your question fully, we need to really look at East Side Access in combination with some of the other projects that are going, including Third Track, including the planned Metro North to Penn. So it really needs to be looked at holistically, but there are some figures, Bill.
Yeah, the count is as part of the EIS is 162,000 passenger trips per day at full revenue service is what's forecast for East Side Access to Midtown.
Bill, what was the date of that? Do you have a rough sense of when that was calculated? It's okay now. I don't know if that's a 20-year-old figure, a 10-year-old figure, or a more recent figure.
It's not a more recent figure. I'd have to go. We'll have to go back. We can get that information to you of when that forecast was done.
Susan?
First, three things. I'm hopeful that your discussions with Amtrak will be fruitful because this would be a long-term benefit to every railroad here. Secondly, I do think we need to redo the ridership estimates. Many things have changed since those were done, which might even precede my tenure on this board. So that really has to go forward. And lastly, Bill, East Side Access has a number of critical points that they're dates that we really have to meet, many of them involving Harold. With only 4, are you able to reschedule the work so that we're addressing those critical points and selecting what gets done? Is that at all possible with your limited resources?
Well, this is a temporary condition. You know, we're in effect standing down construction activity over a couple months in order for the infrastructure improvements to occur at Penn Station, as they should. We are working with both Amtrak and Long Island Railroad to take what we had scheduled, which was the pre-cutover testing for the signal cutover, the major signal cutover next year. It was scheduled for July and August this year, the pre-cutover testing weekends. We're now working with them to reschedule those as a priority in September, October. And we fully expect that we'll get their support.
That's probably part of Jano's discussion.
Absolutely. That's very much central to that.
Yeah. Ira?
Just to be clear, the problems we're having in Amtrak aren't just related to this small summer thing. We've had an ongoing issues with Amtrak. Certainly this thing benefits them, although I just think they have their own priorities, especially the bypass tracks benefit them. But I think we definitely need a long-term agreement with them. It's just we have the East River Tunnel outages coming up. We have a whole host of things. I guess you're working with them to see where we're going to fit this in so we could finish this work on time in 2022. Because right now, as we speak, from the last CPOC briefing on this, as I understand it, we're coming up with, if things continue the way they are, we're coming up with losing almost all our contingency because of this issue with Amtrak. That was the last briefing, as I remember. So it's of deep concern. As far as ridership goes, I would love to see new numbers, but I think you'd have to look at, I mean, there's been different efforts over the years. It's so Evan says everything shifted to the west side, but there's some zoning issues going around Grand Central that are being looked at, up zoning there, and that's the future, and that's when this thing is going to open. So I think it's taken so long to build this that things move to the west side, and when this thing finally opens, things will be moving back also for an increased east side development. So I guess it's all going to just work out.
Well, one has to remember this project provides 2 benefits. Number one, obviously, it provides access for Long Island Railroad riders to the east side, but what it also does is provide resiliency and redundancy for Long Island Railroad riders so that if there are issues at Penn, we also have the option of going directly to Grand Central. So it provides, I'm not saying one is more important than the other, both are provided by this project, just as bringing Metro North to Penn Station provides the same type of issues in context, regardless to some degree of how many people do it. It's there for the possibility of it happening if there's an emergency or a track outage or a tunnel issue or whatever it happens to be. So I think it's important that we look at the numbers and have them updated, but the benefit of the project goes beyond just the numbers per se.
Well, it's the future, and I think that this summer is certainly an experience of what Mitch was and I talked about too. Is if East Side Access had opened on time, which means it would have been open now as originally planned.
Right.
This summer would not be the summer of hell. There'd be this fantastic alternative. It's not available. There's probably blame to go around, and Amtrak, us, whatever. But I think it's illustrative of what we need to do and the need for this project, regardless of whether you think. And again, this is a permanent expansion of the system. This is going to be for the next 50, 100 years at least. So to think there's not going to be development on the east side of Manhattan is silly. So I don't. It'd be good to see the numbers and how the usage, but that the project is East Side Access for Long Island Railroad is something planned really from the 70s, is necessary, regardless of these numbers.
Right. Chuck? You want to put your microphone on?
While the work is ongoing at Penn Station, could somebody take a look at the pigsty that is Penn Station and clean that up?
We cannot accomplish impossible things. We can only accomplish possible things. So,
as I have said before, mea culpa. As building commissioner, I would have closed the damn place down.
Well, when we get to the Moynihan funding agreement a little later in the agenda, we can discuss the Penn Station issue and the Penn Station retail development issues, but they are all related to each other. There's no question about that. Susan, did you want to add something further?
I just wanted to add that the ridership numbers that I recall predated the Penn Station access, which changes everything around. So before we get any more information, we have to have a new study and moving right along.
Yep. Okay. MTA Police? Chief?
Good morning. The President said this morning the summer planning involved an all-hands-on-deck effort, and as he indicated, this certainly involved the MTA PD. MTA Police has been completely involved in the summer plan, deploying officers, supervisors, and command staff to all of the bus, ferry, and hubs locations throughout the area. In addition to that, we're enforcing the bus lanes on 34th Street and 42nd Street. So this effort involved almost every one of the MTA police officers, supervisors, and like I said, command staff. So I'd like to thank them for their outstanding efforts these past several weeks, and we're going to keep it going till completion. For the crime report, system-wide, total major felonies were down by 2. That's 26 versus 28, or a reduction of 7%. And year-to-date, there were 134 crimes versus 149 crimes, down 15 or 10%. And Long Island Railroad, for the month, experienced a reduction of major felonies of 50%. That's 7 versus 14, down 7 or 50%. And year-to-date, Long Island Railroad experienced 56 crimes versus 66. That's down 10 or 15%. That concludes my report.
Any questions for the chief? If not, thank you. Pat, action item, Moynihan funding agreement, page 32.
Yeah, on page 32, your book, we have a staff summary. This has to do with the Moynihan concourse that I showed you in the earlier slides. There are actually 2 pieces to this staff summary. One is for us to fund the overrun that was incurred on this project. This project was managed by Empire State Development, and we funded the project. And there is now that they're at the end, we know what the final cost is, and it's an additional $10.7 million that we need to allocate out of our capital program over to ESD to be able to pay for this project. The second piece of this is, as part of the project, there was LED lighting that was put in the ceiling over there. The old ceiling was rather low, as much of Penn Station suffers from, and they put special effort into lighting to try and lighten the place and brighten the place and make it more appealing. That was done in conjunction with New York Power Authority, and they funded the work, and we will pay them back as part of our electric payment for the next 10 years, and that is in keeping with the master agreement that we have with them, but board approval is required to be able to do that.
Questions on this item? Veronica?
The staff summary indicates that there's no net savings from the LED installation, but how can that be? Because they're known to be incredibly efficient light sources.
Yeah, well, this is a situation where the old West End concourse didn't have very many lights. This is a new installation, so it's tough to compare it.
Mark, just if I could add one thing. NYPA did an analysis comparing these energy-efficient lights versus fluorescent bulbs, which had been there previously. They estimate a $109,000 annual savings, just comparing the old lights to the new lights. And it's a 44% savings in efficiency and cost. But as Pat said, there are more lights, it's more well lit now, so that's why we chose to word the staff summary the way we did.
Any other questions on this item? Motion to approve, there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. We have 3 information items. Starting on page 35 on Penn Station Retail.
Yeah, the first one is on Penn Station Retail, and Jeff Rosen is here if there are any questions.
Jeff, where's Jeff? Oh, there's Jeff. Okay, sorry. I assume because of all the activities taking place at Penn and all of the changes taking place, that the real estate at Penn is in kind of like transition or flux to some degree, and I know you and I have discussed a significant number of new plans and new ideas for Penn that can't be done until all this other work gets done first. So is that really where we are there at the moment?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mitch. If you look at the numbers, we actually held up quite well considering that we have not renewed a few leases and are in fact, preparing for renovations that the governor announced. I will say that quite apart from what's happening on our side of the aisle to the south, I think you've observed over the last year or so or more a significant improvement in the quality of the retail to the north side. That's the Vornado retail, based on the agreement that we brought to the board a year or so ago, and we do participate in that revenue as well.
And I think the other thing that will be interesting is to see what effect the opening of the West End Concourse will have on the retail sales, where they will occur, how they may or may not change in that context as people try and find a new way in and out of Penn.
That's right. It's newly opened, so it's early to say.
Any other questions on that item? Okay. Environmental audit is on page 41.
Yeah, the environmental audit is a yearly requirement. This is our yearly update in accordance with the New York State requirements.
Any questions on that? If not, and then we have the schedule for work for September.
Yeah, this is for work for beginning in September. A number of items going on. One of the biggest ones will be a mechanized tire replacement out on the Montauk branch. Obviously, we wait till after the summer season to do the work out there. So that will begin, as well as continuing work we're doing this summer on the Babylon branch. There's, again, a number of weekend items on there. So.
Any questions on any of those items? And I see we are doing a lot of prep work for the replacement of the Post Avenue Bridge, which is an essential component of lots of things in that area. And
Yes.
affects lots of services. Okay. There are no Long Island Railroad procurements, I see, but there are capital construction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our friend.
Good morning. Capital Construction's procurement package this month consists of 2 items totaling $2.9 million and begins on page 46. There are no non-competitive items this month. There is one competitive item. The competitive item requests approval of a modification to the East Side Access Project's CM14B GCT Concourse and Facilities Fit-Out Contract to reconfigure and resize HVAC ducts along with relocating affected utilities. The total amount of this modification is $884,000. This item is submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on that item? If not, motion to approve. There a second? All in favor? Aye.
There is one ratification item this month. The ratification item requests the board approve a modification to the East Side Access General Engineering Consultant contract to transfer scope from 3 force account packages and unexercised options from a third-party construction contract, and creating a new third-party construction contract for the amount of $2,004,800. This item is submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on this item? Chuck, go ahead.
Is this the Parsons item?
Yes.
Yes.
There's enough problems going on at East Side Access that I don't want to hold you up, but I do want you to note that there's a notation at the bottom of your staff report that there have been no SAIs involving Parsons since 2008, no significant adverse incidents. I will hand to your counsel a copy of Parsons' agreement to pay $3.8 million to settle federal False Claims Act lawsuits in 2015. My point being, somebody ought to check this stuff, and before they just sign off on it and say it's okay, they ought to take into account when people have recurring problems, is that the kind of people we want to do business with?
I think what we should do is, so we don't hold this up, let's move this to the Finance Committee, and hopefully we will get an answer with regard to the responsibility issues at that time. So I would make a motion to approve the contract. Second? All in favor? Okay. And we'll get a report back on that aspect of it. The monthly operating reports are in the book. Are there any questions in regard to that? Ira, go right ahead.
Yeah, just because we're running late, just a brief comment. I want to note that it's been 6 months. Almost all of our lines are not meeting their goal for this year for, probably a variety of reasons. But there's 2 things in the list of delays that have concerned to me. One is the increase in delays attributed to engineering, and of course, equipment problems. The MDBF, especially for the M7s, is not up to goal and hasn't been. It's been, this is through May. And I just want to express a concern about that. And you could answer now or wait till September to see if there's some plan to address those 2 concerns. I believe engineering is often signal, so I don't know where we're headed with that, but I think that is a concern. I don't want to see us slide down. We have enough troubles.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, traditionally, we have always, as you know, on page 56, you can see the number of significant incidents we've had, and we have had a large number of significant incidents. Penn Station has certainly been a major part of that. The engineering, typically we split into planned and unplanned. The planned are obviously like the mechanized tie replacements and stuff like that where we're doing work. The unplanned are the failed insulated joint or broken rail or whatever we may have. So
there's been a significant increase in unscheduled. That's my concern, actually. And the schedule, that's a planned thing. Even if there's an increase in that, at least we know we planned it. It's the unscheduled again, and also the it's not just 1 month that we had a lower MDBF. We're talking about over a period of time, especially on the M7s, where that's the backbone of the fleet, and that's not replacing them. So
it's the major portion of our fleet. They're doing.
So if someone could get, I don't know, it could wait to September, but I think we need maybe, since this is over a long period of time, we need to see what's happening there.
I can comment just a little bit on it right now. One of the things that's taking place, again, is we are seeing some issues on brakes, and or doors, and the other side of it is the bar has been raised the last 2 years pretty significantly, and so there was concern on our part when you raise the bar, knowing that you're dealing with a fleet that is not 5 years old or 10 years old, it's 15 years old, and to your point, it is the workhorse of that. So I think we are responding accordingly. The other thing that was also we've had is some wheels, like wheel flats and everything else. For whatever reason, our season this year, we had a lot of wheel flats and stuff that's taken some equipment out. And that's created some other things, issues, behind the scenes, as far as us being able to properly cycle the equipment the way that we want to with flats and everything else. So we're definitely monitoring it, monthly as well. But there is some very lofty numbers, and like I said, the staff is working very diligently. I would also comment as well is that we are a part of a study with the Federal Railroad Administration and some of the OEMs on our brakes and stuff, looking at some of our equipment and materials. And so we're getting some very favorable feedback from the FRA and our employees and stuff on their braking area and such on how we're handling these overhauls and addressing. So, and that, I would say those efforts will also cascade over into Metro North as well, since it's a common fleet. So there are some other long-term things as we start into the 15, 20, and 25-year cycle that we need to address now as this fleets continue to age.
Any other questions? Ira, did you have something else you wanted to add or not? You're good? Okay. Bruce, did you want to comment on that? Go ahead.
Well, as far as the engineering delays, it is correct. It has increased significantly from the previous year, as it shows about 580 additional train delays. But as mentioned one time before, over 320 of those are allocated to only 2 failures, both of them, one being a derailment in Jamaica and the other one being we had a collision between 2 track cars. So that was a significant amount of those delays. When you take the remaining delays, we had, as you said, a lot in the signal department area. In June, we had about a third of the 120 failures overall that we had was for old cable, underground cable, that went bad. They measured all right in the previous time, but they did fail. And then the last large area of additional delays was really in a category that we now refer to as basically no cause found. Prior years, we didn't have that category. Right now, we're attributing over 100 delays into that category. So that means, for example, is if a grade crossing is called in that it's failing, and as soon as that happens, we have to take corrective or protective measures over that crossing until a maintainer gets there. A maintainer gets there and there is no failure. The crossing is working as intended, but we had delays associated with it. So in that category, we also had a major increase, being that there was no previous years. It was 0.
Then does this is a number of grade crossings this has happened with, or repeatedly?
Well, it's not only the grade crossing. It does. I can actually get you the numbers if you like.
Yeah,
but it also happens if you have a failure of called in for anything that potentially upsets the train movements, and if nothing's found wrong. You could have a short power outage that could be caused by an unknown, whether it's BSE&G or us, and it comes right back, but until potentially the process itself just takes time to check itself out, and during that time it can delay trains, though nothing is wrong with the system.
Well, it'd be good to see if there's a classification of these and if there's some way of reducing them in some way. See if there's, a cable outage seems to be maybe a preventive maintenance issue we should be on top of. I'm not sure, but it'd be good to see that because we do have an increase, and because of all the other challenges we face on the railroad, it'd be good to try and reduce delays as much as possible.
No, that's our intent. That's what we try.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. So move. Thank you all.